Sau khi đã tìm hiểu xong về màu sắc và vai trò của color correction, color grading trong chương trước, chúng ta có thể thấy rằng hình ảnh quyết định rất nhiều đến cảm xúc của một video. Tuy nhiên, để tạo ra một sản phẩm thực sự sống động và trọn vẹn thì chỉ hình ảnh thôi là chưa đủ. Một yếu tố không kém phần quan trọng, thậm chí có thể nói là quyết định trải nghiệm của người xem, đó chính là âm thanh. Trong thực tế, có rất nhiều video dù hình ảnh không quá cầu kỳ nhưng vẫn tạo được ấn tượng mạnh nhờ vào phần âm thanh được xử lý tốt. Ngược lại, cũng có những video hình ảnh rất đẹp nhưng do âm thanh kém, không rõ ràng hoặc thiếu hiệu ứng nên làm giảm đi rất nhiều giá trị của sản phẩm. Chính vì vậy, trong video này, chúng ta sẽ cùng nhau tìm hiểu về hiệu ứng âm thanh và sound design, tức là cách thiết kế, xử lý và sử dụng âm thanh sao cho phù hợp với nội dung hình ảnh, góp phần nâng cao cảm xúc, tăng tính chân thực và làm cho video trở nên chuyên nghiệp hơn. Ở chương này, chúng ta sẽ lần lượt đi qua các nội dung quan trọng như vai trò của âm thanh trong video, các loại âm thanh thường được sử dụng, cũng như cách xây dựng và thực hiện sound design trong quá trình biên tập. Từ đó giúp chúng ta có cái nhìn tổng quan và nền tảng để áp dụng vào các sản phẩm thực tế sau này. Nào, chúng ta cùng bắt đầu nhé! Khi nhắc đến biên tập video, đa số chúng ta thường chú ý nhiều đến hình ảnh mà đôi khi chưa thực sự quan tâm đúng mức đến âm thanh. Tuy nhiên trên thực tế, âm thanh lại là một trong những yếu tố quan trọng nhất quyết định cảm xúc và trải nghiệm của người xem. Hiệu ứng âm thanh hay còn gọi là sound effects là những âm thanh được thêm vào video để mô phỏng hành động, không gian hoặc tạo điểm nhấn cho hình ảnh. Còn sound design là quá trình thiết kế, sáng tạo, sắp xếp và phối hợp các loại âm thanh như giọng nói, hiệu ứng, âm thanh môi trường và nhạc nền để tạo nên một tổng thể âm thanh hoàn chỉnh cho video. Sound design không chỉ đơn thuần là chèn âm thanh vào video mà còn là một quá trình sáng tạo, đòi hỏi người làm phải hiểu được nội dung, cảm xúc và nhịp điệu của từng cảnh quay. Một video có hình ảnh đẹp nhưng âm thanh kém sẽ làm giảm rất nhiều giá trị của sản phẩm. Ngược lại, một video có sound design tốt có thể khiến cho hình ảnh trở nên sống động, chân thực và giàu cảm xúc hơn rất nhiều. Ví dụ như trong một bộ phim hành động, tiếng bước chân, tiếng va chạm, tiếng nổ hay âm thanh môi trường đều góp phần tạo nên sự kịch tính và hấp dẫn cho từng cảnh quay. Hay trong một đoạn video quảng cáo, chỉ cần một tiếng động cơ tăng tốc hoặc một bản nhạc nền phù hợp cũng có thể làm nổi bật được cảm giác mạnh mẽ và ấn tượng của sản phẩm. Chính vì vậy, trong chương này, chúng ta sẽ cùng tìm hiểu tổng quan về hiệu ứng âm thanh và sound design, vai trò của âm thanh trong video, các loại âm thanh phổ biến cũng như cách thực hiện sound design trong quá trình biên tập. Tiếp theo, chúng ta sẽ tìm hiểu về vai trò của âm thanh trong video. Trên thực tế, âm thanh không chỉ đơn thuần là phần đi kèm với hình ảnh, mà còn là yếu tố trực tiếp tác động đến cảm xúc, nhận thức và trải nghiệm của người xem. Trước hết, âm thanh có vai trò tạo cảm xúc cho video. Chỉ cần thay đổi nhạc nền cùng một khung hình có thể trở nên vui vẻ, buồn bã, hồi hộp hoặc căng thẳng. Ví dụ, trong phim kinh dị, âm thanh dồn dập và cao độ bất thường sẽ khiến người xem cảm thấy lo sợ. Trong khi đó, ở những video du lịch hoặc vlog, nhạc nền nhẹ nhàng, tươi vui lại tạo cảm giác dễ chịu và thoải mái. Thứ hai, âm thanh giúp tăng tính chân thực cho hình ảnh. Những âm thanh như tiếng bước chân, tiếng gió thổi, tiếng xe cộ hay tiếng nói chuyện xung quanh đều giúp cho khung hình trở nên sống động và gần với đời thực hơn. Nếu một cảnh quay chỉ có hình mà không có những âm thanh này, người xem sẽ cảm thấy thiếu tự nhiên và mất đi sự nhập vai. Thứ ba, âm thanh còn có vai trò dẫn dắt nhịp điệu và mạch cảm xúc của video. Nhịp nhanh hay chậm của nhạc nền sẽ quyết định tiết tấu của toàn bộ video. Trong những đoạn cao trào, âm thanh thường được đẩy mạnh để tăng kịch tính. Ngược lại, ở những đoạn lắng, âm thanh lại được giảm nhẹ để tạo chiều sâu cảm xúc. Ngoài ra, âm thanh còn giúp làm nổi bật nội dung và thông điệp của video. Trong video quảng cáo, chỉ một hiệu ứng âm thanh đúng lúc hoặc một đoạn nhạc cao trào cũng có thể khiến người xem chú ý hơn đến sản phẩm. Trong vlog hoặc phim tài liệu, phần lời thoại rõ ràng, dễ nghe sẽ giúp truyền tải thông tin hiệu quả hơn.
Let's talk about this plan of yours. I think it's good, except it sucks. So let me do the plan, and that way it might be really good. Wow.
Tóm lại, âm thanh không chỉ có vai trò hỗ trợ cho hình ảnh mà còn là yếu tố quyết định đến cảm xúc, nhịp điệu, tính chân thực và giá trị truyền tải của một sản phẩm video.
We can let it cool down.
No, I got this. I'm a man.
That's hot. That was good.
Tiếp theo, chúng ta sẽ đi vào phần quan trọng nhất của chương 6, đó là các loại âm thanh thường được sử dụng trong video. Khi làm sound design, chúng ta không chỉ đơn giản là thêm một vài hiệu ứng hay chèn nhạc nền vào cho có, mà phải hiểu rõ từng loại âm thanh, vai trò của nó và cách nó kết hợp với hình ảnh như thế nào. Thông thường, một sản phẩm video hoàn chỉnh sẽ bao gồm 5 nhóm âm thanh chính: Foley Sound, Ambience, Sound Effects, Voice và Music. Đầu tiên là Foley Sound. Đây là những âm thanh mô phỏng lại các hành động trong đời sống, ví dụ như tiếng bước chân, tiếng quần áo, tiếng đặt vật xuống bàn hay tiếng cửa đóng mở. Foley giúp hình ảnh trở nên chân thật hơn và mang lại cảm giác có sức nặng cho nhân vật và hành động. Tiếp theo là Ambience hay âm thanh môi trường. Đây là lớp âm thanh nền rất quan trọng, ví dụ như tiếng gió, tiếng mưa, tiếng xe cộ, âm thanh rừng cây hoặc âm thanh trong quán cà phê. Ambience được dùng để mô tả không gian và tạo chiều sâu cho bối cảnh. Nếu thiếu Ambience, video sẽ giống như được quay trong phòng cách âm, rất thiếu tự nhiên. Nhóm tiếp theo là Sound Effects, hay gọi tắt là SFX. Đây là những âm thanh được tạo ra để tạo điểm nhấn hoặc hiệu ứng đặc biệt cho video. Ví dụ như tiếng whoosh chuyển cảnh, tiếng nổ, tiếng bắn súng, tiếng va chạm hoặc các hiệu ứng âm thanh điện tử trong video quảng cáo. Loại âm thanh này giúp video trở nên mạnh mẽ, kịch tính hoặc phong cách hơn. Nhóm thứ tư là Voice, bao gồm lời thoại nhân vật, giọng thuyết minh, voice-over hoặc giọng dẫn chương trình.
Duke Kaboom, Canada's greatest stuntman. Huh. Oh yeah. Ha. Ha. Yes. Hold on. One more. Oh yeah.
Đây là yếu tố truyền tải thông tin chính cho nội dung video, đặc biệt quan trọng trong vlog, review, quảng cáo hoặc phim tài liệu.
Stop a master criminal from stealing 24 moldy onions. I will give you 48 hours. That's 2 days to find Emmett Totterton. But you strike out, you resign. Splendid. Clawhauser will give you the complete case file.
You're losers, caveman. Always have been. Always will be. Do you really believe you can beat us tomorrow? Face it, caveman. You and your tribe, you just don't have it in you. But I am willing to offer you a deal. A way out. Oh, that's good. I don't know what the queen is worrying about. I mean, we all know what losers cavemen are. Those Stone Age dolts couldn't beat their own grandmothers. Brainless goons, gormless half-wits. Oh! Ah! Stefano! Not so ham-fisted. In fact, enough massage.
Elevar!
Aloft Elevar!
No, from your heart's fire!
Aloft Elevar!
Heart's fire!
Thank you.
Cuối cùng là Music, tức nhạc nền. Đây là lớp âm thanh quan trọng dùng để tạo cảm xúc và dẫn dắt câu chuyện. Nhạc nền có thể làm một cảnh trở nên vui, buồn, căng thẳng, lãng mạn hoặc hồi hộp hơn rất nhiều.
Toast to the ones that we lost on the way, 'cause the drinks bring back all the memories, and the memories bring back your. There's a time that I remember when I did not know no pain, when I believed in forever, everything would stay the same. Now my heart feel like December when somebody say your name, 'cause I can't reach out to call you, but I know I will one day.
Khi kết hợp đầy đủ 5 nhóm âm thanh này, video sẽ trở nên sống động, có chiều sâu và mang lại trải nghiệm hoàn chỉnh cho người xem. Trong thực tế, một video chuyên nghiệp có thể chứa hàng chục đến hàng trăm lớp âm thanh khác nhau, được trộn lại để tạo thành một tổng thể hài hòa.
I won't forget you, buddy.
We all know sound is important, right? Footage often arrives from production MOS, or without sound, or you could also say without personality. It's up to the editor to give the footage character, often through the use of sound design. Today, we're going to sound design a sequence from a dark comedy. To make things interesting, we're going to create two versions. First, a quick initial pass. Then we'll critique it and take our time making a second version where the sound works much better. All right, let's begin. There are 3 steps to making your edit sound awesome. 1. Score. Even if a composer will be scoring music later, it's important to add temp music. This is going to help you design your sound effects in context, and it's also going to help others to understand your vision. 2. Ambience and Foley. We should be able to hear everything we see. Remember, nothing is silent, so even an empty room is going to make noise. 3. Finally, we can reinforce moments with creative sound design. Not everything needs to sound the way it looks. We can even add sounds for things that we can't see, like thoughts, feelings, and camera moves. Let's start by familiarizing ourselves with the footage that we're going to be editing here. It's a short film by Craig D. Foster called Overtime. We'll skip through it a bit quickly. The movie opens showing Ralph at work in his office. Ordinary paperwork is made to appear menacing. Then there's some dialogue at the end. Ralph is evidently anxious to get home, but is delayed when his boss Simon arrives with more work. Cue the movie's main title card. Alright, without further ado, here's our initial pass. Using stock libraries, we've added score, sound effects, and sound design. Let's take a listen.
Simon. Ralph.
It's a good start, but there's definitely some issues. Number 1, some elements of the score match the edit, but some don't. The beginning sounds good, but the cue quickly changes into a lighter-hearted melody, more reminiscent of something like a crime drama. Number 2, we forgot to add ambience. During the quiet moments, the soundscape is noticeably dead and doesn't contain the hum and the hiss present in everyday life. Also, there's not enough variety in the sound effects. We've used the same keyboard sound for every letter typed, and the same pen sound for every pen stroke. Moving on, once you start adding sound design to the edit, sections that are missing it become more obvious. We could definitely cover more of the edit with creative sound design. Next, treatment and effects on the audio. A lot of our assets have been recorded in a studio environment. They don't have the reverberation that would be present in a small boxy room. And finally, there's definitely some room for more creativity. We're missing an opportunity to use sound to contribute to our story in non-literal ways. Let's get to work. We're going to start with the score. It's not terrible, but it could be better. The problem is, unless a cue has been scored specifically for your edit, it won't line up. For example, this staple being pulled is a great moment. The cut builds towards it in our first edit, but as you can tell, it kind of falls flat without the support of the score. So instead of playing the cue straight, we're going to cut it up to match our edit. We'll use the beginning of the cue, cutting before the tone changes for that opening scare, and then this small section from the end for the staple being pulled. We'll line that final hit up with the moment that the staple gets pulled. The transition is pretty much invisible because we've chosen 2 sections of the cue that are similar. Orchestral music without rhythm, like this, is really easy to edit because there are no beats to line up. For the rest of the edit, we found another cue from a different artist. It's simpler than the opening cue. More of an ominous drone than any sort of melody. We'll apply the same principles though, cutting the cue so that hits and dips along with loud and quiet moments all fall in the right place. Now let's work on the ambience. We'll mute the score and the sound effects so that we can hear what's going on. Unless your film is set in space where nobody can hear you scream, every location in a movie should have ambient sound. Ralph is working late in a private office here. There's not many people around. So what does an empty office actually sound like? We'll use something simple. The hum of an air conditioner is going to work fine. We'll add some wind for the only outside shot, this POV of the sun setting, and then don't forget to lower the volume of any ambience to a suitable level. Next, let's address those repetitive sound effects. So we're using stock assets. We found this keystroke sound effect. The problem is that I use the same sound effect every single time. And like I said before, we did the same thing with the pen strokes. Instead of a single keystroke, here's a clip of typing that lasts 10 seconds. It has multiple keystrokes in it, and each one sounds slightly different. But we can't use them as they are. If we add the clip directly to the timeline, it's not going to match the on-screen action. We'll place some cuts to separate individual keystrokes, and then use each sound once and line them up. Editing with waveforms visible is vital when lining up the apex of a sound effect to your edit. You can add markers to make it easier. So it's important to be thorough with your sound design. Once you start adding sounds, sections that are missing sound effects become very, very obvious. We'll add some sounds for the blinds, the watch, and the knocks on the door. This staple remover is going to be a little bit harder. It's not the kind of thing that you'd find on stock libraries. So maybe we can find something that sounds similar. It's a metal on metal sound, like scissors. Ah, perfect. Stock libraries are great, but with more particular visuals, it can often be difficult to find the right sound. In those instances, you can record Foley at your desk straight into your timeline. The exact procedure is going to vary between NLEs, but once you're set up, you'll be able to record audio while you watch your edit. Your performance doesn't need to be perfect. We can always chop it up afterwards and match it more carefully to the edit. Excellent. The mix is sounding pretty good, but there's something important missing: reverberation. All our Foley has been recorded in a studio environment with acoustic baffling. Ralph's office, on the other hand, should have some reverb. Here's what our section of Foley sounded like before a bit of environmental reverb. And here's what it sounded like after. Much more natural sounding and fitting of the character's environment. Instead of adding reverb to each individual clip, we'll route all our Foley tracks through a submix, sometimes called a bus. By adding a reverb effect to that submix, we can apply it to all of our Foley in one go. The next problem that we're going to tackle is the lack of creativity in general. Sound is most powerful when we use it to communicate things that the audience cannot see. We're not talking about action that's off screen. What we're actually talking about are things like emotions and feelings. This is probably the single biggest way that our edit can improve. So it's time to get creative and use sound design to communicate the abstract instead of the obvious. The opening credits don't feel right playing out in complete silence. We'll add some chimes to match the text reveal, and a drone as a precursor to the first musical cue. The wondrous sound of the chimes, mixed with the uncertainty of the drone, sets the perfect tone here. Now, let's add a reverse impact to the de-stapling moment to make it a little bit more sinister. Perfect. Alright, this middle section feels pretty good with all the key strikes, the pen strokes, and the like. So we're going to skip to a section at the end that feels a bit empty at the moment. Ripe for creative sound design work. So we don't want the tone to be too dark here, because this is also a comedy. Whooshes can add levity to moments and help reinforce the comedic nature of the movie. Think Hot Fuzz. So, we'll add whooshes to all of Ralph's quick movements in this section, and to this camera move at the end. Next, hits make things more dramatic. For example, placing a box of files on a desk. In itself, not particularly dramatic. But adding a reverberating hit here tells our audience that this box has more severe consequences than we might realize. Very cool. So there's lots of other moments that we can sound design too. Remember, Sound design is an iterative process. You're not going to get it all right in just one pass. For example, we can emphasize parts of the score with additional sound effects. I'm going to add an impact to the first musical stab. Let's add some horrifying bone crunching to the staple remover. Layering sounds is a great way of making your soundscape richer. Stationary definitely doesn't sound like that. But because these crunching and squelching sound effects are similar in tone and frequency to the natural sounds of the staple remover and the shredder, we can actually integrate them pretty naturally into the mix. These definitely make the scene more intriguing, a little uneasy, and they heighten the audience's curiosity, and of course also foreshadow things that are going to come later in the film. This is a very stylized edit, so the whooshes, the hits, and the other sound effects fit right in. With other styles of editing, they might be pretty out of place. Now, important point here. Once you've committed to a style, it's important to be consistent throughout the piece. Sometimes, moments worthy of sound accenting are obvious, like our paper box drop, and also like these quick character movements. But others can be more subtle, and we need to learn how to recognize them and then how to treat them. As a general rule, both visual movement and lighting changes should clue you into the fact that you might have that type of moment on your hands. For example, look at this sundown. If we added a reverse cymbal leading up to the cut and layer it with a bass drop that starts right on the cut, you've now effectively accented a moment that might have otherwise been a missed opportunity. The end result is that you've got a more consistently styled piece, which a more novice editor might not have been able to achieve. Now, there's one last important point about sound design that we want to share with you. Not every moment needs to be accented, and not every accented moment needs to be maximum intensity. You need to be balanced. Let's look at an example of what we mean by this. If we overload this moment too far, we create problems. Have a listen.
Simon. Ralph.
Those two pieces of sound design, the bass drop and the hit, are far too intense for a soft moment like this that isn't confined to one single frame and isn't even the climax of the scene. The movement when the hand is pulled back is meant to be a momentary pause in the tension versus a major impactful event. Ralph is about to go home, and this is the moment when he realizes that he can't do that. Identify key moments. If you try to make every moment special, none of them will be special. This moment still deserves sound design, just something subtler. Have a look with the hits turned off, leaving only the cymbal suck.
Simon. Ralph.
Much better and more appropriate. Now let's look at the actual climax. We've already lined the score up. We'll add a reverse cymbal, also known as a suckback, and a boom. Combined with the score, this now signals the resolution of the scene and the setup of the next. Okay, so the pieces are there, but the levels are all over the place. It's time to mix the audio. We need to make sure that the score, dialogue, and sound effects all play at the correct levels in relation to each other. When using your audio meters, here's kind of a rough guide. Make sure that nothing peaks. Aim for dialogue around -12 dB. It tends to be one of the loudest things in our mix. This obviously is because we want people to be able to understand the dialogue and follow the story. Depending on what they are, sound effects will be anywhere from -10 dB to -30 dB. And then the score or the music itself tends to sit around -20 to -30 dB. All right, now let's see how it all sounds.
Simon. Ralph.
Not bad. Sound design is an iterative process. Like building a brick wall, good sound design is made up of many small touches that, when you step back, make something truly awesome. Start with the foundations: score, ambience, Foley, and then keep on building with more and more creativity. Well-built layers add sophistication and interest to the entire audio bed. Follow a consistent workflow, yes, but creatively try to think outside the box. And of course, remember, these techniques are applicable no matter what software that you work in. All right, now go sound design something. It'll be fun, I promise.
Hey everyone, I'm Blessed Beats with Soundation. Today I'm going to show you how to transform a mix that sounds dull and uneven into a tight, clear, and energetic mix. All by using compressors and limiters. But first, what exactly are compressors and limiters? Compressors and limiters are essential tools for shaping the dynamics of a sound. A compressor balances a sound by making the quiet parts louder and the loud parts quieter, while a limiter helps increase the volume without making it distort. Both are powerful tools that, when used well, can take your mix to a professional level. So let's dive in and learn how to use them. To start, let's take a look at the drums in this mix. Right now, they sound a bit weak and boring. Adding a compressor can help bring out more energy and attitude. First, find the drum channel and click on this icon to open the bottom panel. Here, you can add the compressor effect. When you play the audio, you'll see a visual of the sound waves and how the compressor affects the audio. You can start by selecting a preset. Let's go with heavy rock drums. This is a great way to start using compression if you're having trouble wrapping your head around it. Now let's go over the first setting that you should understand: threshold. The threshold is the level at which the compressor starts working. In the visualizer, the white line represents the threshold. Any sound above this line will be compressed, while anything below it won't be affected at all. You'll also see a red line representing the gain reduction. This shows how much compression is being applied. Watch the red line move as the sound crosses the threshold, showing you that compression is happening. The ratio controls the intensity of the compression for sounds that cross the threshold. Starting from 0, raising the ratio gradually increases the compression. Higher ratios squash the sound more. Since compression reduces the overall volume, you can compensate by adjusting the output gain. To ensure we're not just making the sound louder, you can use the volume meter to level match. Switch the meter to RMS, toggle the compressor's bypass button, and adjust the output gain to match the original loudness. This helps us hear the true effect of the compression without the louder is better bias. Check out our video on volume for more details about level matching. And notice how, with the compressor on, the quieter parts of the drums are brought up, giving them more energy and smack. Listen to the difference. Here's the before, and here's the after. Now let's switch to peak mode on the volume meter. You'll notice that the drums are now peaking higher. This happens because the compressor is not catching every sharp transient. Those are the quick, high energy spikes at the start of the sounds, like the initial hit of a drum. To handle these stray peaks, we can add a limiter after the compressor. A limiter is similar to a compressor, but instead of just reducing peaks, it completely prevents any sound from going above a certain level. Here's how it works. The limiter threshold sets the ceiling of the limiter. Anything above this level will be pulled back while everything else stays the same. The threshold is already set to a good point, so we don't need to adjust it. In this case, the limiter doesn't alter the overall sound. It just keeps those sudden peaks in check, giving us more control and headroom in our mix. Now let's look at balancing elements. In this hi-hat and clap loop, the clap is noticeably louder than the hi-hats. To even them out, we can use compression to reduce the clap's volume while keeping the hi-hats consistent. Start by adjusting the threshold so that the compressor mainly affects the clap. Then turn up the ratio for stronger compression. You still hear the clap pushing through, which is because of the attack setting. The attack time determines how quickly the compressor starts working once the sound goes above the threshold. Here it's set to 10 milliseconds, meaning there's a slight delay before the compressor kicks in, letting some of the clap come through first. To catch more of the clap, lower the attack. In the visualizer, you can now see the clap's original level in dark gray and the compressed level in lighter gray. It's more balanced with a hi-hat. Even with a fast attack, some sounds have such sharp transients that a compressor alone can't control them. For example, in this click and shaker loop, the initial click is too strong compared to the shaker. This is where a limiter comes in handy. Limiters react faster than compressors, so they're ideal for taming sharp transients like this one. To balance the click with a shaker, simply lower the limiter threshold until the click is under control. This reduces the peak volume of the click, making it feel more even with the shaker. Here's the before. Take a look at the volume meter to see the difference in peak level. And here's the after. Sometimes, instead of taming a transient, you might want to emphasize it to make it pop more. For example, if this clap sounds too flat, we can add some compression to add some snappiness. Start by adding a compressor to the clap and setting up the threshold and ratio as usual. Now, notice what happens when we adjust the attack. At a very fast attack, the compressor flattens out the clap, reducing its transient. But when we increase the attack to around 10 to 15 milliseconds, we allow the initial snap of the clap to pass through before the compressor kicks in. This lets us keep the body of the clap compressed while giving the transient that extra boost. Then add some output gain to bring the overall sound up. This amplifies the transient along with the rest of the clap so it sounds snappier and more dynamic. With this approach, we can shape the transient to sound the way we want it to. We can also use the release to shape the tail of the sound. Release time controls how long it takes for the compressor to return to normal after the sound drops below the threshold. With a short release, watch how the gain reduction immediately jumps back up. A longer release holds the gain reduction a bit longer, compressing the body of the clap. I want it to be back to normal by the time the next clap hits. This lets the reverb tail rise in volume as the compression fades, and this creates a lift to the end of each clap while also adding a bit of groove. Let's move on to shaping the attack of this electric organ bass, which currently sounds a bit too soft at the start of each note. We can use a compressor to give it more punch and impact. Add a compressor and set the threshold and ratio to begin compressing the sound. Now increase the attack time to about 20 to 30 milliseconds. By setting a longer attack, we allow the initial punch of each note to pass through before the compressor kicks in, making the bass sound more defined and powerful. Now let's boost the sustain of weaker sounds like this xylophone and coda. Compression can help bring out the body of these instruments, making them feel more lively and full. Let's start with the xylophone. Add a compressor, set up the threshold and ratio, and give it a fast attack to catch transients but leave a bit of snappiness. Then adjust the release to keep the beginning of each note compressed while allowing the sustain to bounce back. Then when you're increasing the output, you're essentially boosting the sustain. Follow up with a limiter after the compressor to keep sudden volume spikes in check. Here's a tip. The order of effects can matter a lot. Notice how the compressor is placed after the reverb on this track. This allows the reverb to be compressed along with the instrument, and it sounds like this. Placing the compressor before the reverb creates a completely different effect. Let's apply the same approach to the coda as well. Here's the before. And the after. Both instruments now sound stronger and they sit better in the mix. You can also use a limiter to boost up the sustain of a sound. Let's add a limiter to this synth loop. By increasing the gain and lowering the threshold, we can refocus the sound and put more emphasis on the sustain of the sound instead of the attack. Let's talk about vocals, which often need extra attention to stay consistent and clear. In this vocal track, you'll notice that this part is too loud, while this part is too quiet. To even out these dynamics, we'll use a popular technique called dual compression. You can guess what that is. Instead of relying on one compressor, we use two. This approach allows each compressor to work less and differently, making the sound a bit more natural. For the first compressor, set the threshold just above the quietest parts so it catches most of the louder moments. Use a fast attack and release to quickly handle peaks and smooth out any sudden jumps in volume. Since we're using two compressors, you can keep the ratio in the middle for more gentle compression. Increase the output gain to compensate for any volume reduction. For the second compressor, set it up similarly, but with a slower attack and release to achieve a slightly more relaxed effect. This helps keep the overall volume steady without flattening the vocals too much. By layering these two compressors, we get a smooth and balanced vocal that sits evenly in the mix without losing its natural dynamics. The mix is starting to come together. Wow! Now, let's make it sound even more cohesive with what's called glue compression. And you can guess what that is. That's not what it is. This technique uses a single compressor on multiple sounds at once to give them a more unified level. We will apply glue compression on the master channel so that it affects the entire mix. Open the master channel by clicking here, or 0. Every track runs through this channel, so any effect we add here will impact the whole mix. Add a compressor. The key to glue compression is subtlety, but start by setting the ratio a bit higher just so you can hear what the compressor is doing clearly. Then adjust the attack and release to enhance the track's groove. A good starting point is an attack of around 20 milliseconds and a release of around 100 milliseconds. But tweak these settings to suit your track's feel. Once the compression feels right, dial back the threshold and ratio to make it less intense. The gain reduction line should barely move, just a light touch to bind the mix together. Lastly, make sure to level match the output. Listen to how the mix sounds more solid with this gentle compression. Now that our mix is balanced and cohesive, let's do the final step, using a limiter to make the entire track louder without causing distortion. The most crucial part of mastering. Add a limiter to the master channel at the end and set the threshold to around -1 decibel. This is a common standard for streaming platforms to make sure your track doesn't clip. Next, increase the gain to make the track as loud as you want, but be careful not to overdo it, as pushing the limiter too hard can cause unwanted distortion. Find a balance where the track is loud but still clean. Finally, check the master channel to make sure it's peaking at -1 decibel, and you should be good to go. Again, for more details on this, check out our volume tutorial. Let's take a listen to the final before and after. First with all the compressors and limiters turned off, and then with them turned back on. Notice how the track feels fuller, more balanced, and more professional. And there you have it. That's how you can fix a mix using dynamics effects like compressors and limiters. Remember, compression isn't always necessary on every element in the mix, especially with electronic music where samples and synth sounds are already processed a bunch before. If it sounds good, trust your ears and leave it as it is.
Give me 10 minutes to show you how EQ works, what it does, and how to use it. And no, this is not some comprehensive learn everything that you need to know about EQ kind of a clickbaity video. The goal here is to give you a fast and basic understanding of EQ that you can run with. So let's just do it. EQ is short for equalizer, and what EQs specifically do are alter the volume of specific frequencies. That's it. So a simple EQ plugin would look like this channel EQ, which is right here. This is the stock EQ in Logic, which sounds quite nice. Or we can actually use vintage style EQs, which are going to look a little bit more like this instead, with the knobs instead of more of the visualizer that we can see with the channel EQ strip. They ultimately do the same thing, but the visual aesthetic is going to be the main difference. And yes, they're going to sound a little bit different from each other, but they do the exact same thing. Now for this video, I'm going to be using the channel EQ since it's a bit easier to visualize. So EQs have three primary controls that every EQ is going to have. First is the frequency, which is going to control what specific frequency range we want to alter. You can see we go from 20 all the way down here on the left, all the way up to 20K on the right. This is actual frequencies. Now the frequencies are measured in hertz, which are directly related to pitch. So 440, which would be right around here. You can see 440 down there, 448. That is an A. So if I were to sing an A, that would be 440 hertz. But in the EQ sense, this is what specific tonal characteristic of that sound that we are going to be shaping. Now the second control is volume. We can manipulate frequencies by adding or subtracting volume from that specific frequency. So if I wanted to remove some of this 448 hertz right here, I could subtract that or I could boost it. And as you can see here on this little dial right here, that is showing the amount that we're actually doing it. And that is going to be measured in decibels or dBs. And the third is the shape. There are three types of shapes that we can use. There is a filter, which is going to be something like this right here on the top end, or something like this right here on the bottom end. So this right here on the bottom is what's called a high pass filter, which would cut everything below the amount that we set it to. So this shaded region right here, that red shaded region, is going to be completely eliminated. So as you can see here, I have this set to 98 hertz. So everything below 98 hertz at this type of slope is going to be eliminated from that sound. Now, a shelf is going to look like this. It's going to be a boosted shelf. That right there is a reduced shelf. And as you can see by the shape, it's going to boost or subtract in a shelf-like shape. So it's not going to entirely add or remove, but it comes to a plateau. And the third type is a bell shape, which is mostly used in the middle frequency spectrums right here. And you can see right here, as I boost this, that looks like a bell. Now we can control the actual width of the bell, the specific shape of that bell, with this little bottom number right here, which is called Q control or Q factor. And as we bump that up, as you can see, that is getting more and more narrow. And as we make that smaller, that number is going to add more width to the actual frequency. So something like this right here is going to boost starting at 448 in the middle, but as you can see here, it's actually boosting all the way down into like 40 hertz. It's boosting all the way up into like basically 6K hertz, which that's barely anything. But as we start increasing this number, we could basically make it so it's only impacting 448 hertz. So in a practical sense, these three controls are the most important controls to be aware of. Yes, you can go much, much deeper, but right now, these are the three that we are going to focus on. The pitch of these frequencies go from the lowest all the way down here. So this is going to be super, super, super bassy frequencies. 80 hertz is going to be like where your kick and your bass is sitting, all the way up to 20K, which is going to be extremely sibilant. That's going to be more of the on cymbals and things like that. Now, every sound we can use is ultimately made up of more than one frequency. So even if you're singing in A, which is 440 hertz, there are going to be more frequencies present in that sound than just 440 because of the room you may be in, the harmonic series, and essentially a bunch of other mathematical reasons that we're not going to get into. So you can see in this analyzer here, I'm actually going to have you see me singing in A, which is 440 hertz with this EQ here, and I'm going to turn the analyzer on here so that you can actually see what's happening. So you can actually see right here a little snapshot of everything. You can see that there is more than 440. You can see the 440 is actually basically right there. That's the primary note that's happening. And you can see here there's actually something happening basically 200 hertz underneath of it. And then there's another couple hundred hertz above and all the way up, so on and so forth. That's the room, that's the harmonic series and other things that are actually impacting that sound. So it's not just that one frequency that's present, even though that's the only note that I actually sang. So just because you sing a note at 440, for example, there are going to be other frequencies present in that sound that you need to be aware of. Now, this matters because if you're working with a recorded vocal, for example, then that vocal may actually have frequencies that are causing problems within the context of a production, and EQ can be used to fix it by cutting out the offending frequencies. So in this vocal, for example, a lot of times vocal recordings are going to have this mid-range woofy sound that is not desirable. So you can actually use EQ to remove that and correct it. So looking at this vocal again, if we listen to this, I want to show you what I'm talking about. If I were to boost right around 200 hertz, you're going to notice this. Listen, watch to this. Now, if you're wearing headphones, you should really be able to hear that, and if not, you should put some headphones on or use monitors. So you can hear that is really not a great sound. It's really woofy. Yet this sound is often present in vocals, especially for home studio producers who don't have a well-treated environment, and it also depends a lot on the microphone that you're actually using. But we can cut off these offending frequencies by removing, say, 3 to 5 dB. Now, this cut right here is actually a pretty wide cut. I'd probably want to be a little bit more surgical with it, so let's go ahead and remove that. So that right there got rid of it. Now, just because I'm saying this is what you may need to do does not mean that you always need to do this. In this particular case, depending on the actual track and the context of that vocal, I might not actually need to do that. This is where applying these concepts is going to come down to using your own ears. Another example is a piano. Pianos are incredibly resonant instruments, and they're going to contain a lot of different frequencies. So when you're thinking about how to approach a piano, if there's something sounding off on that sound or it's sounding bad, then you should focus entirely on identifying where that sound is in the frequency spectrum. And you can do that by boosting a narrow band bell to the point to where you can clearly hear it and then sweep through the frequencies like this. You can obviously hear how that is sweeping through. Now, this is not something that you should rely on long term, but you can use this as a way to train your ears. So if you're thinking, there's something kind of mid-rangey that doesn't sound great, you can use this to boost and find and identify where that problem is, and then do the opposite, actually go back and cut. So say around 250 hertz there was a problem, you can just cut that. So as you sweep, you're probably going to feel like it all sounds bad, because ultimately it's all going to sound bad, because if you boost any frequency enough, it's going to sound bad. So use this only to identify where you actually need to cut, and don't just start adding cuts everywhere because all these frequencies sound bad when they're boosted. On the flip, there may be frequencies that you want to add into a sound for color, to add brightness on this piano, for example, or add low end on something like bass or kick. So this piano right here, I could go ahead and add some brightness with something like a high shelf right here and maybe boost it around 6K, 8K, or somewhere in that ballpark, and we can see how this will sound. So let's just go ahead and shut this off and listen to the piano completely bypass on the EQ. Okay, and let's go ahead and add this. I'm going to be a little bit dramatic, more so than I'd probably be in real life, but just so you can hear it. So as you can hear, as I really start cranking it up, it starts sounding a little weird. So here's off, and then I'll turn it on. So this is a little bit subtle, right? It's not like this, whoa, that's such a big difference, but it does sound brighter. Now, one big thing to note is that when you boost EQ, it's going to increase the overall volume of that sound. So keep an eye on your fader to make sure that you don't get out of control with clipping. Now, most EQs are going to have multiple bands, and a band is simply the number of times you can adjust the EQ. So in the channel EQ that I have here, I have 4 different bell curves, I have 2 different shelves, and then I have 2 different filters. Not all EQs are going to have the same amount. Some will only even have a single band. Just because you have several bands does not mean you have to use them all at once. A huge mistake I see producers and mixers make is making EQ moves that are totally unnecessary, which usually ends up making it worse. If your EQ looks like this right here, I would argue that 9 out of 10 times you are doing more.
Distortion is one of the most interesting topics in audio. It's seemingly simple, but it's such a complex and nuanced part of recording, mixing, and mastering. So let's cover all the different types of distortion, from tape to tube, clipping, and more. We'll talk about where types of distortion overlap, where they differ, and of course look behind the scenes to get a better idea of what's actually happening. So let's get into distortion, a definitive guide. Starting off, let's answer the question, what is distortion? So we all know what distortion is from how it sounds, but what is it on a fundamental level? In short, what we're used to hearing are sine waves, not often pure tone or single frequency sine waves, but a bunch of sine waves stacked on top of one another to create a complex waveform. When sound travels through the air, that's almost always what's formed. Air molecules compress and contract gradually, resulting in smooth transitions. This is the case for sound pressures that range from our threshold for hearing to a little under our threshold for pain. So, the majority of the time, this is what we hear and what we've come to expect as the normal way things should sound. When this gradual transition is interrupted, for example, if the peak and the trough of the waveform are held at a consistent amplitude for a period of time, instead of behaving like they normally would, we'd achieve a square wave. So this explains what distortion is. It's a deviation from the typical sine wave we've become used to. But why does distortion sound distinct? So distortion isn't as much a subtraction to a sound wave as it is an addition. But let me explain that in a less convoluted way. So say we have a sine wave. We introduce a clipper, and whenever the peaks and the troughs hit a ceiling, the waveform is limited to a specific amplitude. This looks like part of the sine wave has been cut off, hence the name clipper, but what's actually happened is that we've added a new waveform. The new waveform is equal and opposite to the section of the sine wave that's been affected. So, the more I clip the original waveform, the higher the amplitude of this new equal and opposite waveform. Additionally, notice that this new waveform isn't the same frequency as the original. Specifically, it has 3 times the number of oscillations per second as the original sine wave. So, if the clipped sine wave is 100 Hz, then this new waveform is 300 Hz. If this sounds a lot like a harmonic, that's because it is. This is how harmonics are created. Changes to the original waveform create new waveforms that are whole number multiples of the original, like 2x, 3x, 4x, and so on. This is the main reason why distortion sounds like distortion. We're no longer listening to the original waveform, we're listening to the original waveform plus 1 or more additional waveforms that are whole number multiples of that original frequency. But not all distortion or newly added waveforms are whole number multiples. In other words, there are ways to distort a waveform that results in a new wave that's maybe 2.3x the frequency of the original, or 4.7x the frequency of the original. But this brings me to the next important concept to understand. Why harmonics sound different than disharmonious overtones. So think about the term harmonic as it relates to music. In music, a melody can have harmonies. As the melody changes from note to note, the harmony changes notes in a corresponding manner, just with different notes. For example, say I have a melody that starts with C4, also known as middle C on a piano. The harmony starts with C6, or 2 octaves above C4. The frequency of a note doubles every octave. So, Since C4 is 261.63 Hz, this means C5 is 523.26 Hz. C6 would then be 1046.52 Hz, and so on. Now, say I run C4 through a clipper, and that clipper creates a third-order harmonic. The third-order harmonic, being 3x the original frequency, has a frequency of 784.89 Hz. Now that's essentially the note G5, which would be a perfect fifth of the original C4 note. Music theory aside, multiplying a note's frequency by a whole number will often result in another note. When a distortion plugin creates a new waveform that's in the same key as the original waveform, it's going to sound musical because it follows the same musical structure as the composition or the arrangement. This isn't always the case with harmonic distortion. However, it occurs enough for listeners to prefer one form of distortion over another. This is the primary reason even-order harmonics are considered more musical. If I multiply C4 or 261.6 Hz by 2, I get 523 Hz, or C5. If I multiply it by 4, I get 1046 Hz, or C6. Even-order harmonics are always perfect octaves, meaning they'll always be in the same musical key and subsequently sound more musical. But what about multiples that aren't whole numbers? Say I distort a wave in a way that creates a new waveform that's 2.3 times the original frequency. What happens then? So going back to C4, or 261.63 Hz, multiply that by 2.3, and we get about 601 Hz, which doesn't correspond to our Western musical scale. When played along with notes in our musical scale, it's not going to sound musical, since it's not a note. Since distortion combines the original waveform with the added waveform, this means that both C4 and this non-corresponding frequency will play at the same time. Since our ears are acutely aware of pitch, octaves, harmonies, etc., this disharmonious frequency is going to stick out. Now, why some distortion sounds pleasant and other distortion doesn't comes down to this. The added frequency either fits into the musical scale or it doesn't. Now, real quick, before we get too deep into different types of distortion, let's run through some important definitions. So, saturation refers to when a component is no longer capable of handling more input. So, for example, when tape saturates, all of the magnetic particles have been reoriented and can no longer represent or have their polarity changed to record additional signals. Now, this causes wave shaping. The input and the output no longer have a one-to-one relationship, so higher amplitude signals will have to be reshaped. Like when we run a signal into a clipper, the ceiling serves as the point of saturation in which the amplitude is retained to a specific level. As we covered, this reshaping causes harmonics, which is what we perceive as distortion. So saturation, wave shaping, and distortion can all somewhat be used interchangeably. They technically refer to different points in a process, but they're all necessary. You can't have wave shaping without saturation. If wave shaping is occurring, there has to be some form of saturation. If harmonics are generated, that means the wave was shaped, etc. They're not exactly the same thing, but they're so interconnected, you can get away with using them interchangeably. Now, with that in mind, let's cover how distortion types differ. So there are two main categories for distortion: symmetrical and asymmetrical. Symmetrical, like the clipping example that I've been using, includes identical shaping to both the peak and the trough of a waveform. Notice that both sides of the waveform, the positive and the negative, the compression and rarefaction, the peak and trough, are clipped when I observe a clipped sine wave through an oscilloscope. Asymmetrical includes shaping to either the peak or the trough, or to both, but in different ways. Maybe the peak is soft clipped, but the trough is hard clipped, or vice versa. Maybe the peak is left alone, but the trough is affected, and so on. Now, this matters most due to how it alters the sound. Symmetrical distortion creates odd harmonics. Asymmetrical creates both even and odd harmonics. Now, something called rectification creates only even harmonics. It's a form of asymmetrical distortion, but the peak or the trough is left completely alone, while the other is entirely inverted. It's not super common as a creative effect, since it gets rid of the fundamental by essentially doubling the number of oscillations per second, but it's good to know about nonetheless. Now, tape, tube, transistor, transformer, digital or clipping, and any form of distortion you can think of fall into these categories. Get professional analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. Seriously though, when people work with us, they get results. That's why major industry professionals like Keith Urban's producer Aaron Schurz works with us, Grammy award-winning AJ Castillo, Billboard #1 charted artist Megan Lindsay, Grammy award-winning artist Toulis, The Voice singer Cody Ballou, Grammy-nominated producer Tyler Kane, Warner Music artist Ricky Young, and the list goes on. Watch the rest of this video, and at the end, use the link in the description to get direct access to us for personalized analog mastering that accurately translates what you hear in your head. So, last up for this video, let's discuss which forms of distortion or saturation are symmetrical and which are asymmetrical, and see if we can find an example of rectification. Starting off, let's talk about asymmetrical. So tubes, transformers, transistors, and guitar amps, which are a combination of tubes and transistors, or one or the other, all introduce asymmetrical wave shaping when they saturate, meaning they generate both even and odd harmonics. By extension, any compressors, equalizers, or similar hardware or hardware emulations that include all of these components or emulations of them can cause asymmetrical wave shaping and subsequent even and odd harmonics. As for rectifiers, you could find plugins that introduce the effect to the audio, but the majority of rectifiers in audio hardware are used in the power circuits to convert AC current into DC. This wave shaping occurs to the current, not the input or the audio, so it shouldn't create audible distortion. Next, let's discuss symmetrical. Soft and hard knee clippers, tape, upward processors or maximizers like the Oxford Inflator, and brick wall limiters introduce symmetrical wave shaping when they saturate or process, meaning they generate odd harmonics. Things get more complicated though when you consider how plugins can vary in how they saturate from developer to developer. For example, saturation in FabFilter's Saturn II is symmetrical, but saturation in Melda Audio's Saturate plugin is asymmetrical. Additionally, if you have a tape machine, for example, there are multiple points at which the signal could saturate. Saturating the tape itself results in symmetrical wave shaping. However, say the circuit or the amplifier uses tubes, transformers, etc. Then, saturating that circuit would create asymmetrical wave shaping. So with so many variables, ways to code a plugin, ways to create a circuit, and so on, you can see how there are nearly endless possibilities for distortion. Also, as I mentioned earlier, some plugins wave shape in a manner that creates more than just whole number multiples of the saturated frequency. If we observe the harmonics that's created from this free plugin, Plastic Funeral, one designed to create aggressive and chaotic distortion, notice how many harmonics are present. These include odd harmonics and potentially even harmonics. However, it includes frequencies that seemingly don't relate to the original waveform. When this occurs, it's because one section of the oscillation is being shaped, creating a frequency that doesn't correlate to the original.
Và như vậy, chúng ta đã kết thúc toàn bộ chương 6, chương nói về hiệu ứng âm thanh và sound design trong sản xuất video. Qua những nội dung vừa rồi, có thể thấy rằng âm thanh không chỉ là phần phụ trong hậu kỳ, mà là một yếu tố quan trọng giúp hình ảnh trở nên sống động, chân thật và giàu cảm xúc hơn. Từ Foley, Ambience, SFX cho đến lời thoại, nhạc nền hay các kỹ thuật xử lý như EQ, Compressor, Limiter và Distortion. Tất cả đều góp phần tạo nên trải nghiệm nghe nhìn hoàn chỉnh cho người xem. Điều quan trọng nhất sau chương học này chính là hiểu được rằng sound design là sự kết hợp tinh tế giữa nghệ thuật và kỹ thuật. Kỹ thuật giúp âm thanh sạch, rõ và cân bằng, còn nghệ thuật giúp âm thanh mang cá tính, cảm xúc và phong cách riêng cho từng sản phẩm. Hy vọng rằng sau chương 6, mọi người không chỉ biết cách chỉnh âm thanh tốt hơn mà còn hiểu được vai trò của âm thanh trong storytelling, kể chuyện bằng video. Khi âm thanh và hình ảnh hòa quyện, sản phẩm sẽ trở nên chuyên nghiệp, cuốn hút và để lại dấu ấn sâu hơn trong lòng người xem. Chương 6 kết thúc tại đây. Cảm ơn mọi người đã theo dõi và chúng ta sẽ cùng tiếp tục phát triển kỹ năng dựng phim qua những bài học tiếp theo ở phần sau của môn học.
Even if there's a small chance, we owe this to everyone who's not in this room to try.
We will. Whatever it takes. Whatever it takes.